Welcome to the Virtual CPA Success Show, where we're 100% focused on helping service-based businesses achieve success. Are you a business owner interested in learning how to scale your business? Has your business reached over $1 million in annual revenue? Then this podcast is for you.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's podcast. I'm very excited about today's topic, but before we get to the topic, I want to let you know I'm also very excited about today's guests. So as always, we are joined by Jody Grunden here from Summit CPA.
Hey, Jamie.
And Morgan Witham from COLAB. So Morgan, if you want to give a little bit of your background as well as COLAB's background, we really appreciate that.
Great, and thank you for having me on here. So my name is Morgan Witham, and I'm the CEO at COLAB. We are a digital agency. We call ourselves a web ops agency, which is not a widely known term yet, although we are on a mission to change that. But the work that we do is really about designing and building websites, platforms through an iterative process and in a way that that really sets our clients up for future success. So we're kind of done with this old model of launch it and leave it with our websites, and really focused on this ongoing iterative process to continue to improve, continue to learn from data, continue to build out features. And kind of the other key part of web ops for us is really focusing on the holistic organization or company that we're working with. So you may think of a website as being primarily housed and owned by a marketing team, and that's certainly the case. Usually our primary point of contact is a marketer. Where we have found tremendous success over the course of our existence for 14 years is really using the information that we build up, kind of especially in the discovery and strategy phases of what we do, to figure out how we can support and not just passively support, but really drive an organization forward. So we're very much focused on the vision, the long-term goals of our clients, and not only focused on just a website design. So we've kind of got, it's really built into how we build websites. We've got pretty strong points of view on how to build it in a way to allow it to live on indefinitely, to be scalable, to be flexible, and to really drive value. So that's who we are. COLAB is based in Richmond, Virginia. Like I said, we've been around for 14 years. It was founded by Eddie O'Leary. And I joined the team about 5 years ago. My background is not traditional in the digital space. The first 12 years of my career was actually as a mergers and acquisitions investment banker. So finance and really learning about how businesses grow and scale and ultimately sell over time was where my strong suit was. And as Eddie was scaling the business, I think he, as a lot of, I think, typical entrepreneurs are, really excels and is his best kind of in that visionary state. And so I pulled on to really take kind of the nuts and bolts of creating a strategy and building a team to execute on that strategy. So I've been in the industry for 5 years now, and glad to be here to talk about something that I think may strike a lot of your listeners as impossible and crazy. And I'm going to work my hardest to debunk that.
Well, I'm all for impossible and crazy for sure. And we'll tell you before, and I've known Eddie probably for, probably close to 10 years. And he said it wasn't until he brought you on and took away his own title as CEO and appointed you CEO that the company really started flourishing, and it really changed the way that he, as an entrepreneur, looked at things. And so lot of kudos there. I mean, that's got to be a tough one, I would think, for him. With him not speaking here, I mean, how do you think he took that initially, taking the CEO, title off my co-founder or my founder hat and giving it to someone like yourself who had really no experience in the creative agency?
No, it's a totally fair question. In fact, when Eddie first broached the idea with me, which we had known each other prior to coming on board, I'd worked with his wife for a really long time. And I think my first response when he asked about it was, I'm an investment banker, right? I don't know anything about digital. And I think a couple things that I think speak really highly into his credit. One, that was intentional on his point. He was like, that's the point. You can't get sucked into the day-to-day, which is accurate. I would be totally useless to our WordPress and Drupal developers or our UX UI designers in the thick of it. And so it was a very intentional decision on his part. Get somebody that can really focus on growing and scaling the business, and not focus so much on the work. And I think the second thing that really speaks to his credit is because, to your point, Jody, I could see that being difficult to let go. And I had that same trepidation when I first started of, is this going to be a strange push and pull? And am I going to step on toes? And is he ready to really let go? And from day one, I think he's been very clear on, you are in the decision-making seat. This is your responsibility, and really kind of handed the reins over to me at the beginning. And never in kind of an abdicating his passion or work in it, but very much in a, you use me as a sounding board, and when we need to discuss things together, let's do it. But ultimately, you're the decision maker. I think the biggest challenge, which is not unexpected at all, is, when you're a founder, there is a lot of inherent emotional ties to the work. That as somebody who, even as somebody in my role who is responsible for 30 some odd people, and I take very seriously and keeps me up at night a lot of times, there's still a very different relationship with that. And so I think kind of the emotional letting go, and when you're no longer in the seat where you are in the thick of the day-to-day or making decisions, but you're still holding on to some of the very natural anxiety that any founder would have, that's where that's been, a good challenge, but one that we've worked through together. So it's been a wild ride. I thrive in a very steep learning curve. So for me, it's been exciting. We've got a phenomenal team. Those kudos do not belong to me. I would have very little impact if it wasn't for the rest of the leadership team and the team that we work with day in and day out. So that's just kind of the approach that we take on it. I think I'm also very honest with my team about what I know and what I don't know. So there's very little ego in terms of being able to say, I don't have the answer, but one thing I'm really good at is finding people who do have the answer. So I think the ability to learn and be resourceful has made it work really well. And it's been fun.
Well, kudos to you. Kudos
for sure. Yeah, it sounds like quite the adventure, and definitely not an easy undertaking to jump into that role, especially with your background. So it sounds like it's been successful, which is awesome. So let's talk about one of your key initiatives, or one of your recent initiatives, I guess. So it's a thing that everybody dreams about, everybody talks about, and it was interesting. I was actually having a conversation with my kids last night, young kids in middle school, and my son, after we've been in school for a couple months now, was like, "Why are there so few weekend days and so many school days?" And I was like, "Well, I don't know. Let's talk about it." So I'm like, that's what we're going to talk about today. And so you have been able to successfully move your team from a 5-day work week to a 4-day work week. So you want to kind of let's start at the beginning. Let's talk about how this was approached with the team.
Yeah. So I'll kind of back up a little further, even to when this idea kind of started percolating in my head. It started last October. I was listening to NPR, and they were doing an interview with another team, and I can't even remember what the industry was now, but had moved to a 4-day work week. And they were talking about kind of what they learned along the way. And I remember, excuse me, as I often do when I kind of, it's like the ideas you get in the shower when you're driving, and you get these ideas. And I remember listening to it and being like, yeah, that is super awesome in theory. And kind of I didn't realize it until later, but I had been noodling on it and chewing on it for probably 2 months after that. And just curious. And so I really started to do a lot of research into who's doing this? How do they set this up? What are the pitfalls they find? When people do this successfully, why is it successful? When it fails, why does it fail? And it over the course of 2 months shifted from the initial kind of thinking that I was doing in my head, was making a really long list of all the reasons why there's no way in hell that would work. And that list was incredibly long. So my initial noodling was not at all unlike, we should do this. We should figure this out. It was like, this can't work for these, dozens of reasons. And then, like I said, I think it just kind of translated into curiosity. I started doing a lot of research. And after the course of doing research, excuse me, kind of shifting my mindset into why the hell not? Why couldn't it work? Why shouldn't it work? And so I kind of very intentionally, for fear out of being laughed out of the room, instead of bringing it up in our weekly leadership team meeting, kind of picked off my leadership team members one off and started off very candidly with like, hear me out. Let me let me throw an idea out there and just kind of let me get through my thinking before you ask questions or tell me I'm crazy. And I kind of went through just like an elevator pitch on it with them of why I think we should do it. Did I have confidence that it was going to work? Absolutely not. But where I think it could be beneficial, what I'd kind of learned in my research. And then after planting the seed, and to all of my team's credit, none of them looked at me like I was crazy, which was good. So I at least felt like, okay, they're open-minded and in listening mode. Great. So in a following leadership team meeting, really kind of pulled out, here's what I found. Here are some of the benefits they're finding. We're also, and I think we are certainly not alone. I know we're not alone. We actually just had a sales call earlier today, and we're hear this across all industries, but finding and retaining talent right now is incredibly difficult, and difficult in a way that I have certainly never seen in my kind of 20 years of working. And it is not industry agnostic. It's happening everywhere. And we are not special in that. We're finding that to be the case as well. And so really thinking about and we compete for talent with not just very large agencies, but also very large companies that compete for the exact same talent in-house. And so what a Capital One might be able to pay versus what a smaller agency might pay, there's a differential there. It's an appropriate differential, and the work is very different, and the work environment is very different. But how are we going to compete? Throwing money at it was not the only solution. It could be a solution, but it's not the only solution. And just really thinking about, and I think the pandemic has had this effect on a lot of people as well, of kind of forcing us to sit down and really think about what's important. So I'm also no different in that regard. I've had my own kind of personal journey over the last couple of years of thinking about what's important and a little bit of reframing, reframing there. And I think all those things kind of culminated in one to say, like, when you do a lot of reading about the history behind the 5-day work week and the history behind 9 to 5, it just felt more and more obscure. And I think I really bought into this idea of, and neuroscience tells us this, that neurons can't connect. We can't kind of connect these ideas and create new neural pathways when we're actively thinking. Like, that work happens when your brain is in rest. And how can we get to a point where we're not? And I think a lot of agencies share in this, where you're just go, 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 go all the time. And you're on meetings with clients all the time, and you're doing work all the time. And there's very little time to just stop and think and connect the dots and let things kind of maturate and come to fully formed ideas. And I just kind of bought into that idea of, like, if our brains were able to rest, what other ideas might come up? Not just how might we enjoy our lives a little bit differently. So one of the things that in my research, I kind of, became very quickly apparent, was this idea of incorporating the whole team, the whole company, into building this policy for a few reasons. One, because I don't have all the answers. And I also knew that I wasn't going to catch all the blind spots or all the pitfalls. And there's no way to kind of address that with a policy out of the gate. So we decided to pilot it. We rolled it out to the team in a really honest manner, which was, we want to do this for quality of our lives. We want to do this to set us apart from other agencies. We want to do it to really find and retain the best talent. And we want our hypothesis is that we can also start working towards developing even better work when we have time to kind of have creative outlets and think about this. So a couple things we did through the course of that pilot, we set up very clear KPI from the get-go. We did not want it to be ambiguous. We didn't want it to be totally subjective. We needed clear, measurable KPI. So set kind of a handful of metrics on the production side, finance side, and then obviously employee engagement. We had a whole kind of slew of things that we were measuring on the employee engagement and kind of satisfaction scale. And we're really honest about, here are all the things that we don't know the answer to. If 4-day work week doesn't work, do we go back to 5 days? Not sure. How are clients going to take this? Don't know. If I find that I need 5 days to do the work instead of 4, does that mean I'm no longer a fit at COLAB? We don't know yet. and really and we even started to treat it the way we treat some of our projects, which is have a raid log where anybody can jump in and be like, this is a risk. So for instance, we got flagged throughout very early on. Our statements of work have our normal business operating hours. That's a Friday. What do we do? What's our kind of call if the client calls on a Friday? How are we going to handle that? Who's going to respond to that? And we just tackled them one by one, kind of every week we went through it, got feedback from the team. And the message from the get-go was, if we succeed in that, we'll do it together. If we don't succeed in that, we'll do it together. But this isn't just a leadership team coming up with a policy and rolling it out. We've got to figure it out together. So I think that was kind of what went into our approach for the initial pilot.
So with your management team, so do you approach the entire team itself, not just your management team, but everybody?
Yep. Whole team.
Yeah. And everybody is pretty much
in phases, but
okay. And they were pretty much all in favor of it, or did you have a lot of I'm not sure, it's kind of like your reaction. Not sure this is gonna work. What was the total when you brought it?
Yeah.
Because I remember we went fully remote and I brought it to the team, it was like they thought I was joking. and from there, is that the what was the impression that your team felt, management versus everyone else?
Leadership team had more trepidation at the beginning, same trepidation that I had of and there was one moment in talking about it with the leadership team that I thought, we can't do this. This isn't going to work. And it was when my COO asked, okay, so if this doesn't work, do we revert to a 5-day work week? People will it'll be mutiny. Everybody's going to be so mad. And that's when that was my one moment of, oh, we can't do this. This is not going to work. How that translated between then and making the decision to pilot it and roll it out to the team was realizing, and we were, simultaneously, which, in hindsight was too much change at once, making the change to Agile. And so the more we talked through that, okay, well, let's play out some what if scenarios, what's going to happen. The more we talked about it, the more I then kind of realized it's not just black and white. It's not just 4-day work week or 5-day work week. Okay, so if it really doesn't work for the metrics, is it half of a month is 4-day, half is 5-day? Is it once a month? Is it we pivot and do an unlimited PTO policy instead? I've kind of just realized there were so many shades of gray, and I was either too stubborn or unwilling to kind of let the black and white have it or not have it, stop us in our tracks without trying it. So we took that approach to it of we don't know. And if it doesn't work, that doesn't mean some iteration of it doesn't work. So then when we rolled it out to the rest of the team, Jody, to answer your question, there is nothing like telling people that they will forevermore only work 4 days a week that gets people rallied around a goal. So it was very, very positively received. There had been some outside of just my head that started last year on this. We had one employee in particular who is really thoughtful and engaged in this process and was sending me research and really wanted to talk about it. Unbeknownst to him, I had already been kind of plotting this pilot. So we already had some kind of advocates for it. And part of the thinking in this too was we're kind of betting on this is the way that a lot of companies are going to start turning in the next couple of years. Mm-hmm. Why not be the first instead of 2 years from now just jumping on the bandwagon of what everybody else is doing? Kind of how I felt about the unlimited PTO policy, that it was a little bit of once a couple people started doing it, then a whole bunch of others. And even that, when I looked at the research, just didn't feel confident that was going to achieve the goals we wanted to achieve in the way that this would.
Take the advantage while you can, right? Because like you said, when it comes to hiring, just to have this out there is a huge advantage for you guys. And I'm sure you're already seeing the benefits of that. So as you know, you're speaking with 2 CFOs. And so Jody and I are probably right now thinking, okay, before you take any of these steps, hopefully you talked to a CFO and kind of put a forecast together and figured out how you're going to make this work financially. So that's what I'm curious about is how much modeling went into this, and then what were your conclusions from that modeling, or did you guys just jump in and say, we'll make the money work?
Yeah, no, modeling for sure, not quite to the level that I know Summit does, and this was pre us working with Jody's team. But to Jody's team's credit, our CFO on his team, when we first talked about it, did not think we were totally crazy. She was very curious. Excuse me. So we did do some financial modeling and figured out, okay, what do we have? What is our billable target that we have to hit? That's something we already know. So then it's kind of like a game of extraction, and it's more about like, what if we're still going to hit these billable marks? What do we then have to remove to enable that? And so it was a pretty thoughtful exercise of literally pull every single recurring meeting up that any single person, excuse me, sorry for this lingering cough, on our team has, and a long exercise of keep, kill, combine, which I think was probably a bit of a relief for all people, because I think everybody experiences this meeting fatigue, and sometimes we're really, really disciplined about making sure, like, if you leave a meeting and your first thought is that could have been an email, we need to get rid of that. But I think, over time it bloats again, and then you kind of have to pull it back. So that was first step, is knowing what our billable target needed to be, and what we needed to hit in order for it to not negatively impact our financials. And then two, okay, well, what has to go then? Because we can't then squeeze, and for clarity's sake, this isn't a compressed work week. So it's not 40 hours in 4 days.
Yeah.
It is just our team works 32 hours. And so knowing what our billable expectation is, what do we have to carve out that is not billable time in order to do that? So that was part of the modeling as well. That has not been as easy. And certainly there were some ramifications of kind of pulling out internal meetings that I think we've had to find other ways of working through. I think we realized and got feedback as we went through the pilot that it did feel like we were removing some of that like connective tissue time, which is already very difficult in a hybrid, mostly remote model, which we operate in now post COVID. So that is something that, and we don't have kind of a one and done complete solution for that, but something we're really keeping our eye on is if there is connective tissue, kind of internal team connective tissue that's lost as a result of shaving some of that time together, how can we find other ways to replicate that? Or how does that knowledge get baked into our kind of final policy that gets written?
Yeah, we just got back from a conference, Jamie and I did, and there was a few companies that did go the 4-day work week. And a couple of questions I want to kind of get an idea where you're at on this is that a specific day off, meaning a Friday, or does everybody get to choose the day off they want? The other thing is, even if you have that day off, is that day off truly a day off where they're no longer working at all, or are they doing like R&D and catching up on non-billable stuff? How did you define what meant by a 4-day work week?
Yeah. So we had a lot of debate on is it 1 day a week, or does everybody choose? Where we came out was one day a week, Fridays for everybody, they have off. I have seen data that can support either. So I really think it depends on what your goals are for this and how you work with your clients and how your internal teams are structured. For us, my worry about having anybody pick the day that they want off is that the onus would fall on our project managers, our scrum masters, our people who are working to kind of get things scheduled and connected. And I didn't want the onus of that scheduling conflict to fall on kind of one person or one role or one team. So for us, it felt like the best way we can manage that is by having the same day off. I will also say that prior to COVID, we were all primarily working in the office, but we had already had a 1 day that was dedicated, no meeting, work remote day. And our team was very much used to having kind of this dedicated day that we knew we didn't schedule meetings for. That was a Thursday. And we felt like in order for us to not have additional negative impacts, we needed to stick with the same day for everybody across the board. Shoot, Jody, I forgot the second part of that question already. Can you remind me?
So it was one, the changing, and then on that day off, are you completely a day off? Is it?
Yeah, thank you. We are totally off. People are completely checked out. We do have kind of a backup that swaps from member to member of just keep an eye on this kind of support channel that we stood up for this, so that if there's an emergency, we have a process that we follow to do that. But that we've had very few cases of that happening. I mean, outside of a real emergency, and with the type of work that we do with websites, a lot of time if there's an emergency like downtime, for instance, it really goes to the host provider anyway. But we do have a way that we can respond. Sorry. Those automatic lights. I'm not
Time
moving
flights,
it over
right?
here.
You're not moving enough.
It got
Wave your
dark in here
hands.
all of a sudden. Yeah. Figured I'd walk over instead of waving at the camera. And so we do, but we've really needed that very rarely. So it is very hands off. In terms of we have this whole Slack channel where people are posting what they're doing on Fridays. That's been a really kind of cool team building exercise for us of like, volunteered at my daughter's school, went hiking. We have had people who invest in some professional development on that Friday. And I think some people do like it to get organized and prep for the next week, but there are no expectations. And on the whole, people are not working on Friday. I think perhaps the biggest challenge has been at the leadership team level is making sure we're setting the right example, even if we feel like we're having to play catch up. So it's going to be a longer path getting to that time frame for me and some members of our leadership team, but our goal is to really get there. But no expectations. You are off. It is officially a weekend day now.
Yeah. What are like holidays? Like you typically have like 9 holidays a year, roughly.
Great question.
How'd you handle that?
Yep. So we made the decision, excuse me, that for weeks where there is a holiday, we have 9 holidays. The day that we have the holiday is the day that we take off that week instead of Friday. And here was the rationale behind that. The purpose of the 4-day work week is to work 4 days a week. The purpose of the 4-day work week is not to never work on Fridays. And when you talk about having 52 new days of PTO built into the year, we felt like it was a fair kind of way to meet in the middle of, for those holidays, let's have that be the day off, especially our team members with kids. When you have holidays where, maybe not the bigger holidays like Christmas or Thanksgiving, but holidays where a lot of times schools are off, for instance, that we wanted to still follow our holiday schedule, but we felt like it was an appropriate balance to have that be the day off. And so the way, to avoid confusion, we're really good about proactively reminding people in advance of that holiday. We block people's calendars already with the invite for, 4-day work week on Fridays. And whenever we have a holiday, we kind of open that up on the Friday and instead block off the holiday. So we really we go kind of the extra step to make sure it's communicated, because it's kind of easy to forget.
So like if the holiday falls on a Tuesday, the Tuesday they'd have that off, and then they could take a PTO day if they want Monday off as well. That type of thing.
Exactly. And then the other change that we made logistically was to our vacation PTO schedule. So we have a kind of scaling based on tenure PTO schedule. 3 weeks, 4 weeks, and 5 weeks based on certain anniversary milestones. And we did make the change to have 3 weeks equate to 12 days, 4 weeks equate to 16 days, and 5 weeks equate to 20 days. And again, the rationale there was the point is to be able to take a chunk of time off. 1 week, some of our team members like to do a good big 2-3 week, and that's fine. We still wanted people to take that, but since Fridays are off anyway, that's how we wanted to approach that.
So it sounds like a lot of the stuff you're talking about, again, it sounds a lot of that is you're adding hours back. You're starting at the 52 weeks, so 52 days. We're going to take 52 days off. That's X number of hours that we're going to lose from a financial standpoint. Then take some of those for PTO, some of those for vacation. So it sounds like you've kind of built back to where it's not actually a 52-day impact, which is really smart.
Exactly. It turns out to be more like a 35. Is I think where it lands, depending on kind of the vacation schedule and how much PTO people have. So still a significant boost from kind of what would otherwise be probably 26 days for somebody coming in between holidays and vacation. But yeah, it's not, because of those decisions, it's not a full 52 days in addition to what they have.
And then on a typical work week, we see, it varies dramatically, but we see as low as maybe 30 hours a week to as high as maybe 38, that during a 40-hour work week, here's what we want you to bill, assuming no holidays and assume nothing else, but kind of like the weekly expectation. So I assume yours is around 32-ish before you made the change. And then what's your weekly expectation now that you've made the change?
Yeah, 29 now. So we did kind of adjust it a little bit. And there's so many other factors that are going into kind of our billability and how we think about it. One is we are trying to shift away from a majority of our engagements being on a time and material basis and shift away from really just inputs-based pricing to outputs-based pricing or value-based pricing. That is an evolution as we learn how to do that and get better and better at doing that effectively. But that's played a huge role in this too, is that to try and move away from it being so contingent on the exact number of hours worked and figuring out ways, which we think is very fair based on the value that we know we provide our clients. And just some of our past experience, we look at it and think, man, they got, an additional $30 million of revenue as a result of this work. That made no sense that we build that on a time and materials basis. So I think they're kind of all of these not related to the 4-day work week, but tangents that in some way impact the effect that the 4-day work week has on our financials.
So yes, like any story, I would expect that, okay, you rolled this out, you did the pilot and everything worked perfectly the first time. Is that how this works?
Of course. No trouble at all.
Just like a Hollywood movie.
No hiccups. We had all of the answers and no stumbles. No, that is, never the case. That is for sure. So many learnings. I'll put that spin on it. The biggest learning, which I'm almost embarrassed to say because in hindsight, it is so painfully obvious, but we not only in March rolled out the 4-day work week, we also made the decision to start transitioning to an agile process. So started training our team on the agile mindset and figuring out what agile even meant for an agency, which is a whole nother podcast in and of itself. To which I won't be your best person on that because we are in the thick of figuring that out. So we made the decision to transition to an agile framework. We made the decision to start moving to, instead of shared resources for our staffing, to a dedicated team model at the same exact time as we rolled out the 4-day work week. So as you can imagine, that is a lot of shock to a system that has clarity on roles, clarity on process, expectations are clear, and we kind of shook it all up. At the time, they all seemed like such good next steps for where we are in our growth as a company. And I sure as hell wasn't going to be like, oh, once I had momentum on 4-day work week, I was pretty pumped to roll forward with that. So that we set the pilot in March. We set our KPI, what we wanted to measure, which was a range of, as I said, production, financial, and kind of sentiment is what I'll kind of lump some of the others in. And then we said, okay, we're going to do a midpoint. We did a baseline survey for employee engagement and baseline survey for all of our metrics, or baseline analysis of all of our metrics. A midpoint survey to make sure if people weren't adding stuff into the RAID log that we were catching kind of sentiment, what's working, what's not working midway, and post survey where we collected kind of the same really fulsome feedback that we got at the baseline. So we could start measuring and got some really, really great results in terms of a lot of the things that we were kind of hypothesizing and wanted to see. So employee stress level went down, and feelings of burnout went down by a magnitude of almost 20%. Personal satisfaction went up like 25% with physical health, 30% with leisure time, 12% in mental health kind of satisfaction. We had kind of big boost in kind of self-reported productivity, and I'll get to billable hours in just a moment. But in terms of ability to kind of focus and find time to think creatively and innovate, which I think is really important, energy levels, lots of increases in that. In terms of billability, we saw a dip we actually, by the time we kind of did our final report and survey, it ended up being a little closer to 4 months instead of 3 months. It was like 3.5. So in kind of the 2 months in between, in April and May, we saw a dip in billable hours, a dip in financial performance, and then it popped back up in June. So when I sat down and looked at this, I felt like, and the other thing we started seeing some trends in, which is really positive, was team collaboration, which was really good. And our recruiting metrics, our people metrics. So, 100% of the respondents that joined COLAB after we started this pilot said that was a significant deciding factor in their decision to join COLAB.
Wow.
And we were getting a lot of feedback. The retention one is going to take longer to measure because it's very difficult to know. I mean, for a person to know, like, I would have left otherwise, but decided to stay.
Right.
So anecdotally, we feel like that has had some impact, although not the magnitude we expected. So I can talk a little bit about how the 4-day work week is not actually a silver bullet, because I think that's something I did expect coming out of the gate, that this is going to solve all of our problems. Everybody's going to love it so much. It's not a silver bullet. So when we got to the end of the pilot, I really struggled to isolate variables and figure out, why did we have the dip in billable hours and financial performance? I know it's very easy to say, like, well, duh, because you were working less. But the reason that storyline doesn't totally make sense is because March was great and June was great. It was these 2 months. We also, when I kind of look back at that data, realized we onboarded 5 team members in that 2-month period. We're a team of about, it ranges from 25 to 30. That is a significant percentage of our team to grow.
Yep.
And so I just felt like this isn't telling the full story about the 4-day work week. We have too much going on. Wow, that was a bad decision to do all those changes at once, but here we are. And that we decided to extend the pilot another 3 months so that we could continue to figure out, what is the data telling us. We're now coming up on the second end of our pilot. In fact, that the final phase 2 survey just went out last week. So I don't have all the numbers yet, but will very soon. But do know from our productivity in terms of billable hours and financials, we have been rock solid for the last 5 months now. Has been an awesome trend. And just anecdotally, the feedback we've gotten about how life-changing this, I mean, when you think about, we've got team members with all sorts of lives outside of work. We have people who just had new babies who felt like this revolutionized how much time they could spend with their kid. We have people who care for older parents that are aging that can be more involved. We have people who have had hobbies they've wanted to do for years and have never made time. So I think the impact has been pretty revolutionary for our team members, just in terms of how they view their lives and work. Kind of going back to my point about it's not a silver bullet, which maybe sounds naive. It just is such a change that I really did expect this to kind of solve all of our people problems. And it hasn't. It's not. Working less hours a week does not take away the propensity for burnout. I think that's been one of the biggest and maybe hardest lessons that we've learned, is that you can work 32 hours a week and still be burnt out. And it's because burnout, I don't think, and I've always, I think, fundamentally known this, I just didn't necessarily translate it into our hypotheses about the 4-day work week, but there's a lot about connection to the mission and what we do, clarity around the process. We're a team of people on the whole that just has so much heart for one another. I think there is no lack of care and love across the COLAB team, but there are challenges when you make a change like Agile, like dedicated teams, even 4-day work week. There are challenges you have to work through to figure out, how do I do this with less time? How do I make sure I keep pace within those 4 days? And all of that can contribute to burnout. So we've seen a huge impact on our ability to recruit. We haven't yet seen, just from our data so far from this year, the impact that we had expected in terms of retention. But all we can do is use that as a learning lesson and continue to improve what we can. And it's not the 4-day work week that's contributing to that. It's very much us just in this new evolution of our business and doing work differently and really having to figure out, how do we navigate those challenges? So that, I think the it not being a silver bullet was a bit of a shock to me. The second big shock to me was how receptive our clients were. Incredibly receptive. And I realize it's because everybody's dealing with the same people issues. And
so
at the same time. And so and we were really, we had a very thoughtful rollout to our clients. We had communication plan, who was going to make the call, who was going to follow up after that, and making sure we kept kind of the door open to our clients. So, you call me if there's any kind of trouble that you want to have. We don't have the ability to fix it if we don't know about it. And on the whole, we have just it's been so well received by our clients. And I think in some regards, for some of our clients, even I think tremendous respect for man, you guys really care about your team. So that kind of surprised me. I kind of thought they'd maybe not be upset about it, but not receive it the way that they did. That was a big surprise.
The big thing would be is you hope they don't throw it back on you too, right? Okay, it's great when you first announce it to them, but then a month later they see their first mistake or a problem happens, and they're like, "Well, this is because you guys aren't working as much as you used to." You don't want that. That's where that's what I'd be worried about, is that.
And we'll have to keep tabs on that. I mean, that's something that we really do. I don't think it's a it's not something we can leave once we're out of investigating mode in the pilot. It's something we've got to really stay on top of, because we don't want our clients to feel in any way like this is negatively impacting our ability to keep pace of the work, which so far it's the 4-day hasn't impacted our ability to keep pace work. It may mean we need to add more resources than we otherwise would have, but we have levers we can pull to make that work. But we don't want them to ever feel like I don't have a partner that's here when I need them. So it's something we'll have to, I have no doubt there will be a hiccup on that in the future. But that's our goal is to mitigate that as much as we can.
Great. So we are at the end of our time here. So it has flown by, but I want to give both you guys a kind of a chance for last thoughts. I think we unpacked it a lot here, and I know I was kind of taking notes throughout because there's a lot that I was learning as well. But I will give Jody the first crack at his final thoughts here.
I would say when I heard about the 4-day work week, it's something that we put in play like a long time ago and kind of got away from it. We didn't work on Fridays. That was our typical day, or we didn't schedule client meetings on Fridays. It was like you can do whatever you want to do, and like I said, we kind of got away from that over the past few years. But for those out there, I would never be one to criticize or to jump to there's no possible way this can be done on anything. So just keeping an open mind and saying, hey, what can we do if this is how we want to do it, the 4-day work week? What can we do? And you've covered all the bases. You've covered how many hours of work. You covered how to kind of recapture those hours through holidays and so forth. And you covered, all the different, nuances that I could remotely even think that you would have to address. And then you rolled it out into a pilot, which was great, knowing that, hey, team, in 3 months, this might be reverting back, and might not want to, but this is how it might work. I think is a very smart way of doing it. So I definitely know why Eddie had such high praises for you, for sure. Because if you ever want to run a CPA firm, let me know.
Appreciate it. I'll pass along the job opportunity.
All right, Morgan, what's your final thought for the listeners?
Yeah, final thoughts. I'm pretty. I'm not sure I could be moved from my stance on involve your team if you're thinking through this process. I don't think any one person or even any one team can think through all the variations. The people who are on the front line seeing the, from the smallest things like what's in a contract to bigger things, you need the team to help rally around you, and it requires the team to solve those problems. So I think there's also just getting that buy-in and allowing them to be part of creating that policy has a much different, bigger effect than just kind of, here's a new policy. We've thought through all the variations. So use the team. It's not a silver bullet. You still got to focus on all other aspects and angles that can cause burnout or dissatisfaction. I totally agree with Jody. Just because it seems impossible, I'm not sure and I don't know if that's because I'm slightly contrarian by my nature, or risk is, not a particularly risky person, but I think it's challenge that. I think when your knee-jerk reaction is can't be done, ask why and see what comes out of that.
Yeah, no, I think this has been a great podcast for not only the 4-day work week, but for any of these big ideas, right, of how to bring them out and how to roll them out. So I think this has been a good roadmap, and hopefully our listeners take this and be like, I've been thinking about doing this for a while. Maybe I can roll it out using this model. So whatever that big idea is like, this has been a perfect roadmap for it. And I know in our time at Summit, we've rolled out plenty of those big ideas, and it's important to have that plan and get the team involved. So great job, and appreciate all you guys' time.
Thank you for having us.
Enjoy this podcast? Visit our website at summitcpa.net to get more tips and strategies for achieving business success. We're here to be a resource in this ever-changing industry.